By the time this video is uploaded, we'll have been using the new iPhone 14 Pro for about 2 weeks. Using it every day, settling in with it, and just using it as our everyday, ordinary, daily smartphone. So, what's it like? I'm Cam Bunton from Pocket-lint, and this is our review. And while you're here, if you do like it, please do tap that thumbs up, subscribe, and the notification bell to make sure you don't miss any more uploads. Now, I veered away from talking too much about the design when I did the unboxing video, because really there's not a huge amount that's new to say. Apart from new colours and a bigger camera unit, it's the same as the previous 2 versions of Pro iPhone. I love the deep purple colour, but the new space black is also extremely hot. The important thing to note is that just like previous versions, the stainless steel framing gives the phone a reassuring heft, but also makes it feel incredibly sturdy. It's not going to bend or break in a hurry, and that's helped by the durable glass on the front and the back too, which is also more scratch resistant than before. After 2 weeks with no screen protector, there's not even the slightest mark on it. It's very water and dust resistant too, so should comfortably handle being caught in a rainstorm or being used in a shallow pool. Now, having moved from the 13 Pro Max, the one thing I noticed, which seems obvious really, is that the right-angled straight edges don't feel as uncomfortable on the smaller model, because the fingers aren't having to stretch so far, and so don't feel those non-curved edges as keenly. It's a good size then, although if it did have the rounded edges like the iPhone 11 or iPhone SE, it might be super duper comfortable, but then we'd probably miss some of that rigidity that comes with having straight stainless steel edges. Now, the actual biggest design change is the dynamic island, which I've spoken about before in the unboxing. At the beginning, it's a bit of a novelty, but the more we use the phone, the more we realize how useful it is, having that animation area that lets you know when things are running in the background or when your phone changes statuses. Just the simple things like when you look at the lock screen and then the area expands and shows the padlock unlocking, animating to alert you to the fact that it's authenticated you. You get a similar subtle animation when you switch to mute or ring or adjust the volume. Those things no longer take up space on the main display. Sometimes it smoothly expands, other times it jiggles, and then when you're authenticating an Apple Pay payment or downloading from the App Store, you get a big green tick, leaving you in no doubt that it's gone through successfully. As cool as it is, we can't wait to see what other uses will come in the future, and how third parties will be using it for live updates with things like sports scores and such, ensuring you never have to open a full app again just to check the latest score for your favourite team. The only downside initially was that with a few apps, the cutout area being lower than the notch was on previous models, meant that it sometimes got in the way of graphics or icons on screen, but most apps we use now seem to have updated and it no longer seems to cause a problem. Now, for Android users, an always-on display isn't new. It's something that's been on Android devices for years, and not just flagships, but mid-range and even budget handsets too. Apple has offered the technology on its Apple Watch since the Series 5, but the iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max are the first phones from the company to see the technology, so it's exciting for iPhone fans. It's also very well executed. For example, if you have your iPhone in sleep focus, the always-on display turns off to preserve battery life. And the same happens if you're wearing an Apple Watch and you walk away from your device, as it assumes the display doesn't need to be powered during those times. The sleep one I've personally found essential, if only because the always-on display is quite bright and it will light up your room if you leave it on during the night. And that can be a bit distracting when you're trying to fall asleep. Elsewhere on the display, the iPhone 14 Pro offers 1600 nits max brightness, which is 400 nits higher than the iPhone 13 Pro. It also has a peak brightness of 2000 nits. It's exceptionally bright and colours are vibrant and punchy. Blacks as always are super black, making for an excellent viewing experience regardless of the content that you're watching. And the colours seem well balanced too, you don't tend to get over-egging of certain tones. Plus, the 120Hz refresh rate means the experience of swiping on the screen is really smooth and responsive. So whether we were scrolling up and down lists or dropping down notifications or launching into the recent app screen to switch apps, there was no stuttering or lag whatsoever. Now, moving on to performance and battery, and unsurprisingly, performance is great, with the iPhone 14 Pro handling tasks with ease as you'd expect at this level. A stint on Call of Duty or any other game that we frequent saw the iPhone 14 Pro respond quickly without getting hot anywhere in particular, as some handsets do. It also handled multiple tasks at once without much of a problem. Even call quality is good from our experience, and the only time we experienced any lag or slowness was when shooting in Pro RAW, which is a slower experience. And that makes sense given the sheer number of pixels it's trying to process information from. The iPhone 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max come with satellite connectivity too, but being in the UK means we've not been able to test this at all, since it's only available in the US and Canada for now. Being in the UK also meant we have a phone with a SIM tray, so we can't see what it's like to use an eSIM only phone. But if you're someone in the US who travels regularly and wants to buy a local SIM at your destination, or if you move phones regularly, this could be a real pain. The iPhone 14 Pro has also been treated to a battery upgrade, promising up to 23 hours of video playback, compared to 22 on the 13 Pro. Battery performance is user dependent as always, but the iPhone 14 Pro performs well in our experience once it's settled into your patterns. Of course, how well it lasts very much depends on your usage. In our first week we got from 7 AM to 11 PM with 25 to 30% spare with our own usage. That's with all notifications coming through, including emails, Slack, WhatsApp, and multiple calls through the day, and connected to a smartwatch. We're also testing the camera heavily during those early days. Camera, as it happens, seems to be the one feature that does seem to impact the battery most, which isn't exactly an iPhone exclusive problem. As it becomes less new, of course, our usage settles down a bit, and now it's not too rare to finish a day with nearly 40% left over. So it's really not bad at all. If you're a real heavy user, you might still want to consider the Pro Max, which has a bigger, longer lasting battery, and if you still find it a struggle, you can switch off the always on display to make sure you're saving battery juice that way, although that doesn't seem to consume as much battery as you might assume it would. Now moving on to cameras, and in terms of performance, the iPhone 4 Pro delivers crisp, sharp images, clear results in good lighting conditions, as well as decent results in low light conditions. We didn't notice a huge difference compared to the iPhone 13 Pro in good lighting, with the devices pretty much on par. There were improvements in low light conditions though, and not just in the end results, but in the taking of the photo itself. Night mode seems to kick in quicker on the 14 Pro, so you don't have to stand still for as long, and the iPhone 14 Pro has 15 times digital zoom and 3 times optical. And while the iPhone 14 Pro isn't as sharp as the Pixel 6 Pro at the maximum 15 times zoom, it still performs well. But if you're all about long zooms though, then you're probably going to want to look at something like the Galaxy S22 Ultra, which will perform better in this department. Overall, the iPhone 14 Pro delivers a great camera experience, and once again it's a case of being able to point and shoot and get a decent result without really having to fiddle with anything. You can opt to shoot at full 48 megapixels in Pro RAW mode and the results are excellent. But you'll get great results shooting in the default mode too. Pro RAW is also quite slow, so be prepared for that if you want to shoot in that mode all the time. In terms of features, the usual suspects are on board, along with a couple of new features including action mode and a foreground blur for portrait mode. Action mode on the iPhone 14 Pro offers a little more stabilization than the previous version, but the 13 Pro stabilization without this mode wasn't bad before, and actually, even when action mode is switched off, it's still very good on the 14 Pro. In the end, the iPhone 14 Pro is clearly the most exciting of the new phones launched by Apple this year. It's got a fresh design, camera upgrades, processor upgrades, and display improvements. Plus, Dynamic Island is cool in use, and the always-on display makes for a refreshing change in how you interact with the iPhone. The battery also performs well in our experience, which is refreshing considering the display enhancements. There is of course the iPhone 14 Pro Max 2, which is essentially the same, but on a larger scale with a bigger battery, but so far we prefer the more compact size of the smaller iPhone 14 Pro, even though the extra screen space does make for an excellent viewing experience. This is a fantastic device and hands down the iPhone 14 model we most recommend buying. Let me know what you think of the iPhone 14 Pro in the comments down below, or you can grab me on Twitter. If you did like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe and tap that notification bell, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.